If Sophie Bennett could turn back time, she would never have given her mom a spare key to her apartment. The night Patricia barged in without knocking, grocery bags in hand like she owned the place, Sophie realized boundaries weren't just blurred. They were completely obliterated. It was 7:46 p.m. Sophie had just stepped out of the shower after a grueling day at a downtown Seattle law firm. She worked in labor law, and every day felt like an emotional minefield. Layoffs, harassment claims, broken contracts. All she wanted was peace, Netflix, and maybe a glass of Riesling. Instead, she heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. "Mom?" Sophie yelled, clutching her towel and peeking out from behind the bathroom door. "What are you doing?" "You weren't answering my texts. I figured you were hungry. Look, I brought your favorite tuna salad from Whole Foods," Patricia announced. Standing confidently in the hallway like this was some weekly routine. Classic Patricia. Sophie stepped out slowly, still wrapped in her towel. She tried to stay calm, but one thought kept pounding in her head. This is not normal. "Mom, you can't just walk into my apartment. I'm an adult. I'm 29. I don't need to be fed every 3 hours like a toddler." Patricia frowned. "You always get like this when you're alone. Why won't you let me help you meet someone? I know a great guy, my bridge partner's son." Sophie rolled her eyes. Here we go again. Her mom's lineup of eligible bachelors was like a bad 90s sitcom cast. An accountant who collected stamps, a dentist who lived with his cat, and a guy who sold insurance and still called his mom Mommy. And every time Sophie said no, Patricia acted like she'd been personally betrayed. "I just don't want you to end up alone like Aunt Linda," she sighed, settling onto the couch like it was her usual Saturday night spot. So there Sophie stood, still in a towel, watching her mom unpack food, turn on the TV, and of course, pick a movie for them to watch. This wasn't a one-off moment. This was their normal. Sophie had grown up in the suburbs of Tacoma, Washington, in a house where every decision had to be Patricia approved. Even her choice of college was part of her mom's master plan. Where's it safest? Least partying? Where does Professor Schwartz from church teach? That's how Sophie ended up at the University of Puget Sound, even though she'd always dreamed of UCLA and life in LA. She'd promised herself back then that one day she'd live on her own terms. But it turned out, breaking free from the iron grip of a well-meaning but overbearing mom wasn't so easy, even as a grown woman. 2 days after the tuna ambush, Patricia struck again, this time via email. Not a text, not a phone call, an email. Subject: "All my thoughts on Jason." Jason was Sophie's co-worker. Tall, slightly scruffy, dry sense of humor, always drank his coffee black. They'd had lunch together a couple of times, and once he gave her a ride home after a late meeting. That was it. No date, no sparks flying, just regular adult interaction. But somehow Patricia had found him on LinkedIn, stalked his Facebook via her friend's account, and drawn her own conclusions. The email read, "He's cute, though he could use a shave. I noticed he liked a brunette's post in April. Maybe his ex? Be careful. Guys with eyes like that tend to be secretive." Sophie closed her laptop, a chill running down her spine. This was it, the turning point. She realized that if she didn't start setting boundaries now, they'd stay erased forever. This wasn't just about "Mom, don't come in without knocking." It was about the right to be an adult, to make choices, to screw up, to love or not love, without running everything by her mother like she was still 15. That night, she made a decision. She called her brother Nathan, who lived in Portland, and had pretty much gone off-grid when it came to family. "Nate, how did you do it? How did you break away?" "You won't believe it," he said, chuckling. "I just started saying no, and then I blocked her. For 2 months. Best and worst decision of my life." Sophie laughed, but deep down she was terrified. Her mom wasn't a monster, just incapable of letting go. But can love be toxic? Can care actually smother a person? That night, Sophie made a plan. A real strategic one. Almost like filing a legal case, but for her emotional freedom. Step 1. Get the damn key back. But that was just the beginning. Because Patricia? She doesn't go down without a fight. On Saturday morning, Sophie stood at her kitchen counter, staring at the small piece of metal in her hand. A symbol of everything she'd been trying to reclaim. Control, privacy, independence. It was the spare key. The one she'd once handed to Patricia in a moment of weakness. Just in case. Back then, it had felt like a gesture of trust. Now, it felt like an anchor. She slipped the key into a small envelope and wrote on it, "Returning this, with love but with boundaries." She had written the letter to her mom with precision, down to the comma. One full page, neatly formatted, practically a legal memo, because that's just who Sophie was. But this one came with heart. "Dear Mom, I know your actions come from love. I feel it, but lately it hasn't felt like support. It's felt like pressure. I'm 29. I'm a grown woman, and I need personal space. Physical, emotional, and social. I'm asking you to give me that space. This isn't a breakup, it's not a wall, it's a boundary. Please return the key, and please don't come over unless you're invited. I love you. I want us to have a healthy relationship. Your daughter, Sophie." She sealed the envelope and placed it next to her coffee cup. Her heart was racing. The guilt was the hardest part to shake. In a culture where parental care is treated like a sacred duty, setting boundaries can feel like saying, "I don't need you anymore." But that wasn't the truth. She just wanted to breathe. Patricia showed up at 12:15, right on schedule. She was always punctual, even when no one asked her to be. "Why are you calling me over in the middle of the day?" she asked, walking in, of course, without knocking. Sophie met her at the door. This time, she didn't let her step inside. "Mom, I made you some tea, but first," she handed her the envelope. "Please read this." Patricia took it reluctantly, glanced at the writing, and raised her eyebrows. "A letter? You couldn't just talk to me? Please, just read it." Her mom stepped inside, sat at the kitchen table, put on her reading glasses, the ones with the little chain, and began reading. Sophie stood there, watching. Every raised brow, every sigh, every subtle blink felt like watching a miniature weather system pass over her mother's face, from irritation to confusion to hurt to something quieter, restrained pain. "You really think I'm interfering in your life?" Patricia's voice was tight, but not angry. "Mom, you're not just interfering, you're living in it. Like it's yours too, but it's not. It's mine, just mine." Silence. "And what if something happens to you?" her mom asked, her voice suddenly raw. "Who's gonna find you? Who's gonna help?" "Mom, that's not a reason. That's fear, and I get it. I do, but I need to live without someone always watching over me." Patricia quietly set the letter on the table. Then, without a word, she reached into her purse and pulled out the key. She'd been carrying it the whole time. Sophie blinked back tears. "Okay," her mother said softly, "but you're wrong if you think you can be completely independent. Life's more complicated than that." "I'm okay with being wrong," Sophie replied. "That's part of being an adult, too." The next few days were quieter. No pop-in visits, no morning phone calls. Even her messages were brief, just a good morning or a simple "love you." And Sophie felt strange, relieved, yes, but also anxious, and maybe a little lonely. Turned out, freedom didn't just take strength, it took a willingness to sit with yourself. On Monday at work, Jason distracted her again. "You look different," he said near the coffee machine. "Calmer." "Yeah," Sophie grinned. "I disarmed my mom. Literally, almost. Took back the key to my apartment." He laughed. "Damn, sounds like the start of real adulthood, or a psychological thriller." And just like that, she realized she didn't have to hide it anymore. She didn't need to be embarrassed about having complicated family dynamics. Everybody's fighting their own battles, some out in the world, and some right at home. That Wednesday night, she had dinner with her friend Rachel, who'd been through something similar. Only in her case, it was an overprotective grandmother from Wisconsin who'd installed a hallway security cam for safety reasons. "Boundaries aren't cruelty," Rachel said, sipping her margarita. "They're respect, for you and for them, and if you give them a chance, they might actually get it. Sometimes, not always, but hey, it's worth a shot." Sophie smiled. She knew her decision wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. Patricia might have stepped back, but it wouldn't last. Her mom wasn't the type to surrender easily, and somewhere deep down, Sophie knew the next step wouldn't be easier. Because now Patricia would try to reach her through other means, through guilt, through emotion, through subtle pressure. But this time Sophie was ready. She had taken back the key, in every sense of the word. And this was just the first battle. A week had passed. Sophie was enjoying the silence, which at first had seemed unsettling, but now it tasted like freedom. Her mornings didn't start with a nerve-wracking phone call or a reminder to eat breakfast or check the doctor's email. but with a cup of coffee, music, and peace. She'd started writing again, short sketches she'd once been too afraid to show anyone. Long walks along the Elliott Bay waterfront had returned, ones that weren't interrupted by texts saying, "Where are you?" or "Reply ASAP." But inside Sophie, something was building. She knew this calm couldn't last. When it came to Patricia Bennett, silence was never the end. It was a strategy. On Friday evening, 11 days after the key meeting, Sophie went to see her dad, Jim, to drop off a couple of documents. Her parents had divorced when she was 8, and Jim, a man with a philosophical outlook and a habit of avoiding conflict, had always been in her life, but at a distance. "Your mom was here a couple of days ago," he said casually as they sipped tea in his backyard. Sophie tensed. "What?" "Yeah. She came by unexpectedly, with a container of borscht, and, she talked a lot about how you've distanced yourself. She says you've fallen under the influence of the internet, that now it's all about boundaries, emotional distances, all these new trendy words." Sophie sighed. Of course. Patricia hadn't given up. She'd just changed tactics. Now her battle for control wasn't direct, it was through family. "Dad," Sophie said, trying to stay calm, "this isn't about trends, it's about necessity. I need to breathe. I need to make my own decisions. I'm tired of being her project." Jim nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "I know, but you have to understand her too. She dedicated herself to you. And now, she has nothing but you. That's scary. It's painful. And instead of acknowledging that, she controls." Sophie stared into her tea. Her dad had put into words what she'd been feeling but couldn't express. She didn't want to hurt her mom. But where does care turn into suffocation? That evening, Sophie got a message from her mother. Short, as though it were designed to stir up anxiety. "I know you think I'm the problem, but I just want to know you're happy. I'm worried, always." Sophie stared at the screen like it was a grenade. There was nothing overtly aggressive in those words, but they carried guilt wrapped in the disguise of maternal love, the same old emotional manipulation. She didn't reply. Over the weekend, Rachel invited Sophie to a 90s-themed party. TLC and Nirvana blaring, denim overalls, neon headbands. It was loud, fun, chaotic. And it was there, to the beat of No Scrubs, that she saw Jason. He came over with a drink in hand, wearing an old Levi's jacket. "You're not the type to go to parties often, huh?" he asked, smiling. I'm learning to be," Sophie laughed, but there was a truth in the laugh. They stood in the corner, talking. About life. About how hard it was to be an adult when your parents still see you as a kid. Jason had his own story. An absent father who never said "I'm proud of you," but knew exactly how much Jason made and often hinted that he could do better. "Sometimes I think," Jason said, "that our parents don't want to see us happy as much as they want to make sure their version of happiness works. And if we take a different path, it feels like their personal failure." Those words hit Sophie hard. My mom literally sees my boundaries as an attack, like a betrayal. Because you stopped being her project and became a person, and that hurts, especially if you've spent your whole life building walls out of love. Sophie looked at him, not breaking eye contact. Maybe this was real connection, the kind of conversation that was truly close. No drama, no pretense. No mom analyzing every little detail. That night she kissed him, just softly, as if saying to herself, "You have the right to this," without anyone's approval. The next morning, Sunday, a call. "Mom." Sophie didn't answer. Then came a message. "I'm coming by tonight. We need to discuss something, it's important." Sophie felt a shiver crawl up her spine. No, she knew what was coming. Another round. A new form of control. She replied, "No, Mom. If you want, we can talk on video chat, but I'm not ready to let you into my home without a reason." Pause. No reply. An hour. 2. The night stretched on. Nothing. Monday morning she found an envelope wedged in her door. Her mom's handwriting. Inside, a letter. Written by hand. On pink stationery, faintly scented with perfume. At the bottom, a photo, her at 5, smiling in a frilly dress with her mom holding her in her arms. "If you think you can just erase me so easily, you're wrong. You're my daughter. And I'm not going anywhere. Never." Sophie stood with the letter in her hand, holding the photo of her younger self, her eyes still full of innocence and trust, and felt the old fear rise in her throat. Patricia wasn't pretending to care anymore. This was pressure. Open. Brutal. Unmasked. And right then, more than ever before, Sophie realized, It was only going to get tougher from here, because next time her mom wouldn't knock on her door. She might show up at work. She might show up at Jason's place, or at people Sophie had just started letting into her life. This wasn't just a fight for freedom, this was a fight for identity. Sophie read the letter over and over again. The thin pink lines scrawled in Patricia's sprawling handwriting burned in her hands like molten metal. If you think you can just erase me so easily, you're wrong. You are my daughter, and I'm not going anywhere. Never. It wasn't an admission of pain. It was a threat. Wrapped in the scent of Chanel No. 5 and covered in the patterns of a pink stationery store, Sophie slowly folded the paper and tucked it into the drawer of her desk. Then she unlatched the chain on the door. Late that night, she ordered a new digital access system with a code from Amazon. She wouldn't be able to install it herself, but Jason volunteered to help. He didn't ask any questions. He just showed up. "Listen," he said as they sat on the floor, tired, sipping coffee from cardboard cups. "Your mom crossed a line. This isn't just being clingy. This is an invasion of personal space, an emotional aggression." Sophie nodded. She'd felt this for a while, but hearing it out loud gave the words weight. It made it real. "She thinks I've betrayed her," Sophie said, "like I'm obligated to be in her life on her terms." "You don't owe anyone that, not even your mom," Jason said calmly. "Love without respect is just control." Those words stuck with her. Patricia hadn't written for 3 days, and the silence was worse than the most dramatic messages. Sophie waited for a call, for her to show up at the door or visit her dad. But Patricia disappeared. It wasn't retreat, it was preparation. On the 4th day, Wednesday, Sophie was heading to lunch with a colleague when her phone buzzed. A message from Jason. "Your mom came to my work." Sophie froze right in the middle of the sidewalk. "What? What did she say?" "She said you've distanced yourself from the family, that you're going through a difficult phase, and she needs to know who you're seeing for your own safety." Sophie felt ice clench in her chest. This wasn't care anymore. This was surveillance, an invasion into her private life, and now into a relationship that had just begun to bloom. She called her mother. The first time in weeks. Patricia's voice was cold, collected, almost official. "You seriously went to my boyfriend's work?" "I had to," Patricia replied. "He's influencing you. You've changed. You're cold, aggressive, distant. Mom, you just don't accept that I have the right to live my life my way. This isn't aggression. This is adulthood. I am not obligated to be under your watch." "You don't understand," Patricia's voice wavered. "Since you left home, I wake up every night in panic. I feel like you're slipping away from my life, like I'm losing you, and I can't survive that again." "Again?" Pause. Silence. "You said you were losing me. When was the first time?" Another pause. Then, exhaled. "When your father left. He didn't just leave me. He took part of you. I was left alone, and now you want to leave too." Sophie froze. There it was, the root of it all. Not just anxiety, not just overprotectiveness. It was grief, turned into control. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm not leaving. I don't want you standing behind me every single day. You're not losing me. You're losing control. That's not the same thing. I can't live not knowing you're okay." "Then you need to learn to trust." "I don't know how." "Then you'll have to learn, or you'll really lose me." On the other end, silence. "Mom, can you hear me?" "I hear you." Her voice was quiet, almost childlike. "But I don't know how to stop being afraid." That night, Sophie didn't sleep. She didn't think about herself or Jason or Patricia as a manipulator. She thought of her mother as a woman who'd lost her marriage, put everything into her daughter, and now faced emptiness. A life outside of motherhood. No foundation. Who takes care of mothers when children grow up? That didn't absolve Patricia of responsibility, but it added a layer. The pain she'd buried under control. The next morning, Sophie dialed her number. Her mother picked up on the first ring. "Mom, I want to propose something. This isn't a compromise. This is a boundary with respect. I'm listening. I'm not banning you from being part of my life, but I'm setting rules. First, never again will you go to people I'm seeing without my knowledge. Second, we start seeing a family therapist, together. If you're willing, we continue our relationship. If not, I'm taking a break. Not forever, but until you learn how to live not just through me." Pause. "You want me to go to a stranger and talk about us?" Patricia sounded horrified. I want us to have at least one honest conversation where you actually hear me instead of reading me your way." And for the first time, Sophie said this with confidence, without shaking, without the urge to soften it. "If you love me, this is what you need to do." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, "Okay." Sophie exhaled. This wasn't a victory. It was the beginning of a long, complicated journey. But she wasn't alone anymore. Because now, boundaries weren't walls, they were bridges. And this time, they were by her design. The first therapy session went worse than Sophie had expected. But better than she feared. The room was cool, the lighting soft, the chairs were comfy, but the air still felt taut, like a guitar string ready to snap. Patricia sat up straight, like she was preparing for an exam. Sophie, in jeans and a sweater, nervously gripped the armrest. The therapist, Dr. Lauren Hill, a calm woman in her 40s, watched both of them closely. "Today we're going to try not to accuse, but to listen. Even if it hurts," she began. Sophie stayed silent. Patricia did, too. Then Lauren turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Bennett, can you tell me when you first felt that your relationship with your daughter started to change?" There was a long pause. Patricia bit her lip. "When she left home. It wasn't just growing up. It was like she just walked out of my life without asking permission." Sophie flinched. That word, permission, was the crux of it. Like freedom had to be pre-approved. "And how did you feel?" Lauren asked gently. "Panicked," Patricia said, her voice cracking. "Like something slipped away. I started to fear that she would fall, and no one but me would catch her. I knew no one would love her the way I did. And that scared me." In that moment, Sophie heard it for the first time. Not control, but fear. A human, maternal fear. Not about dictating, but about losing. "I get it," Sophie said. "But that's where you were wrong. You thought if it wasn't you, then no one else could. But all I've been trying to do is prove that I can handle things on my own." "I thought you were pushing me away," Patricia said quietly. "Like you forgot everything I did for you." "Mama, I haven't forgotten. But the fact that you loved me the best way you could doesn't give you the right to keep controlling me. That's what growing up is, not betrayal." Lauren nodded at them both. "This is hard, but you both just took a step. The key is not to step back." The sessions continued, difficult. Sometimes with shouting, sometimes with dead silence. But every time Sophie felt it, just a little longer, and she would be free from the role of the daughter under constant watch. And Patricia would be free from the role of the woman whose life only existed through her child. One evening, 2 months into therapy, they sat in a cafe after a session. A normal conversation, the weather, the news. And then, unexpectedly, Patricia asked, "Do you really like Jason?" Sophie smiled. "Yeah, he doesn't save me, he's just there. At first, I thought he was too much of a stranger, but now I think I was just jealous. I know. It's going to be hard. My whole life you were my job. Now, I have to learn how to live again." At 58, Sophie reached across the table and put her hand over Patricia's. "And I'm learning how to be more than just your daughter, but just me." And in that moment, without drama, without tears, it all made sense. A new language of love. Not one based on fear, duty, or guilt, but one where you can be close without losing yourself. A few weeks later, Sophie invited Patricia to a family picnic Jason was hosting. It was a small, awkward event. Blended families, kids, noise, chaos. But Patricia came, in jeans with a dish of salad, nervous but composed. "I don't know how to act," she whispered to Sophie as Jason introduced her to his aunt. "Just don't act like Mom," Sophie smiled. "Act like Patricia." "I don't even know who that is," she said honestly. Sophie squeezed her hand. "Now you have a chance to find out." One autumn day, after a long work week, Sophie returned home. She unlocked the door with her code, took off her coat, turned on the lights, and realized there was no anxiety in her apartment, no tension, no feeling that at any moment someone would burst in to save her from herself. She was pouring tea when a message from Patricia came through. "Today, I signed up for a drawing class. I've never been good at it, but I thought I'd try, just for me." Sophie couldn't help but smile. It was a small thing, but a big one. Patricia was starting to live for herself, not just through her daughter. Sophie replied, "I'm so proud of you, really." Then she looked out the window. The autumn rain was starting to fall, soft, quiet. And in that silence, Sophie understood. Boundaries weren't about distance. They were about the freedom to be close by choice, not out of obligation. And if love is real, it will endure silence, pauses, and refusals, because it doesn't require control, it simply stays.